Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see a few people in chat because I decided a bit last minute to start the show at 9:30 p.m. UK GMT, that is, Greenwich Mean Time, because I've started to do the Wednesday show at 9:30 and I think it's a better time. So sorry that I didn't announce that. I put it on Facebook, but there's a few people in there already. I've had trouble with this chat box as well. I haven't been able to sign in the last few times, but I managed it today. Sometimes it doesn't let me sign in, but I've got Mer in there, Cider Guy, Kath, Between Two Ages, Ken K, Ken, and a few other people are going to be joining us soon, I should think. But the Sunday chat here has often been a bit quiet because I haven't been attending to it. But yeah, the new time for the shows on Sunday is 9:30 p.m. UK time. So I'm going to be advertising that. But we've done some great shows lately, and I've gone into the whole of this agenda in the bigger picture, which I think we've been doing for the last several years. But I was very pleased with the last few shows we've done, all about this new robotic cult, the communitarian cult, and I've been going into that in some detail. So tonight, I want to sort of carry that on a bit, I think. I mean, I've been looking at a lot of stuff today and trying to tie things together into what we call the bigger picture, because I always try and give a philosophical and interesting overview. In other words, to not just give you the news of what's happening, the technocratic takeover, the smart city agenda, everything that's happening around us, which few of us seem to be actually taking much notice of. And that is the frustrating thing when you actually point things out to people, even things like the left and right pantomime. We're going to get into that a bit tonight, and how people are still stuck into this kind of narrow view because they're watching television. They're getting their information from the media. Yes, we're going to be talking about smart city harvesting. Yes, the smart cities are becoming ever more smart in the respect that we're now seeing through the beneficial crisis of COVID-19, that the smart cities are being put alongside that agenda with social distancing and getting rid of cars on the back of the virus. I mean, this is incredible. And of course, we've been reporting on this, how it came out of the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization. We have a multi-agency, real-time exercise which we are in. And it is actually incredible that the public still think that this is spontaneous, even when we're being told that there's going to be a second recurrence of this virus. We're even being told that ISIS may start terrorism again. And I went over this a few weeks ago, how this multi-layered, multi-agency rollout is there for everyone to see, but nobody has the time or inclination to go onto the World Economic Forum, to look at the think tanks that are running this, to go to Johns Hopkins University, Imperial College, and put it all together. Because what we have here is a simulation in real time. It's an exercise. We're in the middle of a global exercise. Yes, we're going to be talking about the BBC Spy Subversion Network over the next few weeks. I've got so much more on how the BBC is linked up to organisations such as Quinitech, all of this military industrial complex stuff through BBC Media Action, the Pirbright Institute, of course Imperial College, and all of the think tanks which are also dictating the narrative of what is in effect public opinion. The smart agenda, yes, the further subversion of the public. Before we start tonight, I want to give you a quote because we've covered the Saul Alinsky rules for radicals over the past few weeks. This is so important because in 2010, the big society arrived. Please go to our last couple of shows in the archive and listen, because this was being done for a particular reason. The archive is created to be that because it is actually a reference library. It's not just a weekly show. That was the whole point of these Sunday shows, to go into a bit more depth and give sort of very clear and specific information which can be absorbed over the hour which the show takes. Yes, Saul Alinsky, the radical housing activist, set up many different movements in the 60s, early 60s. He was kind of, there was a resurgence of his Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals in 2010 in the UK and also in America. And we had David Cameron talking about the big society. We've gone into this in the last couple of shows, so do go back and have a listen to them, because the information in there is very focused, because you don't have to go and read the whole book, Rules for Radicals. You can look at the 13 Rules for Radicals. You can look through that book. You can get Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky, which he dedicated to Lucifer, which is all about subversive tactics to basically not to speak truth to power, but to take power by any means necessary. And we see so much of that now. Saul Alinsky stated, the building of many mass power organizations to merge into a national power popular force, a popular power force, cannot come without many organizers. And there we see how this has expanded. The change agents, all of the useful idiots across society, the public are the enablers of global governance through this mentoring process which they have been indoctrinated into. They are now advertising for people to do contact tracing in the local boroughs and communities in the United Kingdom and, well, all over the world, of course, but here is the centre of it. And very encouragingly, Kent County Council got slaughtered on Facebook when they were asking for volunteers to do this snooping exercise, going into people's homes and tracing people who may have come into contact with someone who may have come into contact with the flu. So, yes, our last few shows we have got in the archive, so please have a look. The dumbing down of everything to most people is almost complete. I mean, communitarianism, let's just go into that before we start. Communitarianism, the word that nobody speaks of. A lot of people think there's no such word. I've had this over the last week, just trying it out. They don't think there's any such word as communitarianism. They went, oh, those others were words, but what's this? That is how clever and subtle the system we are in actually is. It means that people do not have any idea how they're governed, and I'm going to get into that as the show goes on. Communitarianism is the synthesis or the merging of all political and religious opposites under one giant community-controlled umbrella. However, the subversion of the UK public never ends. If the country had a government rather than governance, this may be a bit more obvious to the people who are completely oblivious. The barrage of propaganda is unprecedented. And the level of the subversion is now getting into some fine quality parody, especially with the likes of the BBC. The extremely frightened middle-class Marxist communitarian hive mind enablers of the current pandemic and the psychological warfare programme will never let go of their grip on reality. These people are hanging on to the bitter end, and their lives are going to fall apart. And most of them are hanging on to some form of sanity through the media. Well, that will never happen. You know those people that they used to call conspiracy theorists? It may be time to start listening to them. But it's only when the stability will only ever sort of come back to these people when they actually learn to become whole within themselves. This is one thing I've really noticed, and something I've gone into quite a lot, and something which people who are getting what is going on actually realise. In other words, they know that this is the time to be absolutely empowered with the integrity of yourself. So a lot of people have been preparing themselves for this rollout that's going on, this beneficial crisis of COVID-19, because they had a slight inkling that something like this may happen sometime in the future. Well, newsflash, news just in, it just has happened, you know. But yeah, there has never been a time when the need for discretion and awareness was more important than now. The media victims, of which there are so many, hang on to the right and left idea, the idea that there's a right wing and a left wing, as though it's somehow virtuous to be on this fake left, and there is indeed some kind of far right. I mean, I had to laugh today because this raised its ugly head yet again, and it often does. So blocking the evil of indoctrinated communitarian hive mind virtue signalling hatred is very difficult for those in regular contact with those who have contracted the mind virus. The new fake left and the old fake left unite in virtue signalling and an inbuilt mistrust of who they actually are. Now, this is what I was thinking about today, because I just got into several sort of, I wouldn't say altercations, but kind of interesting diatribes that people put when they don't know what you're talking about and they completely misinterpret what's going on, which is most of the time with the general public, unfortunately. But basically, you've got this kind of old-fashioned left, and you get these people who are involved in sort of arts and music from about 30 years ago when they started getting into it. They were always leftists, and they don't realise that there is no left and right. You cannot tell these people. They have no idea what you're talking about, and they're the first to label you far right, which is given to them by MI5, these think tanks and the BBC, and they just repeat it. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. But basically, yes, it masquerades in this self-conscious righteousness, which is entirely misplaced. I mean, go up to somewhere like Hampstead, or it doesn't really matter. London is rife with this. It's a little bit more spread out in other cities, but the hive mind is omnipresent in the southeast of England. But it was in response to something I posted, and it was a Dutch person telling the BBC to basically F off when they asked him for a comment and an interview. Well, in my view, that was the most honourable thing any person of integrity could do, and the shortest and easiest way of getting rid of them. So I posted this on one of these social media platforms, you know, Facebook. And this fella, who's an old-fashioned lefty retard, in my opinion, right, he said, oh yeah, a Dutch neo-Nazi and an anti-lockdown, in inverted commas, freedom rally doesn't like the BBC. It makes me like the BBC even more, he virtue signalled. Now, so basically, you've got these people who think that there's something virtuous in being absolute dimwits. So basically, I said, oh yeah, the old far-right MI5 programming, it is rife in the media, and it's repeated by clueless dimwits. The public do tend to repeat what they hear over and over again. Now, according to MI5's rejects, this lobbying group, Hope Not Hate, who I've been attacked by, and I've actually got loads more listeners by them having a go at me. It's brilliant. And they couldn't really say much about Windows on the World, apart from it was eccentric, and I had people on that they didn't approve of. You know, I mean, it's just incredible, isn't it? But basically, these Hope Not Hate retards, which is the right word for them, they're very rich retards, of course. Everyone who is outside the controlled narrative is, guess what? Far right. Okay. Now, the BBC, as we know, most of us who've got a functioning brain cell know that the BBC is an arm of British intelligence. It always has been. Of course it has. Which is why the people who work there are poisonous and dumb at the same time. You've got two things going on. Extremely poisonous, toxic, and very dumb at the same time. Now, the far right is a fiction with some useful idiots who act the part, and we know who those are. Now, I don't want to get too much into that because it's pretty boring, but this sort of created far right is a clown show. That's all it is. And you've got these things like the Institute of Strategic Dialogue and Demos and these think tanks pouring out this stuff and these papers where they're going, yes, the growing rise of the far right. Well, where is it? Where is it? You can never find it because it's not there. And then you've got these retards that hope not hate going. It's like the order of 9 angles, which is something probably that's got about a dozen people who do it on the internet. These things no one's heard of. They don't exist apart from in the minds of Joe Mulhall and these absolute retards that hope not hate. So basically, yeah, it's all promoted. And you can tell people this over and over again and they never get it. But the big society started this onslaught and it's fed into the cretinous media at every level. So everyone's a change agent now, which is the idea of communitarianism. Virtue signallers of the world unite is the thing here, right? Like, the usual, which comes out the intelligence services or 7-7 Brigade which is this kind of branch of the British Army who spend their time trolling people on Facebook and Twitter. They have this meme that they put out, which is basically, I suppose you voted Brexit. I bet you support Trump and think that Elvis lives on the far side of the moon, which you can easily subvert. It's really funny. Someone put on there last week, it was about Greta Thunberg being used by CNN, not as a climate scientist, which obviously she is because she can see CO2, but as an expert on COVID-19. And they put down a joke about it all. And I said, why do you hate successful teenage female activists? I mean, this is the language of the idiot subversive, isn't it? And it's so easy to do and it's quite funny. But you are wasting your time going on about this stuff with these middle-class Marxist communitarian retards. I've said retard a few too many times tonight, but I think it's justified. Well, the BBC is full of these clueless middle-class communitarian arseholes without a functioning brain cell between them. I know this because I know loads of people who work there, because years and years ago I was in the media and then I realised that everyone in the media has to be an arsehole if they're going to work for the BBC, or they have to be completely clueless. But not even clever stuff, but aimed at the mentally helpless and ideologically subverted British public, most of them cannot think beyond their plasma screens. Have you noticed the size of these screens? 5 foot by 4 foot, even bigger. I mean, remember when it just used to be a box in the corner of the room and you could get away from it? Not anymore. It's staring you in the face and it's absolutely taking you over. This is like possession, I mean, I haven't had a television for over 25 years, and when I did, it was under control, but it is out of control now. But the fake left and fake right are created by the people who give the BBC their news. And this is the point I was trying to make. But when you try and make this point with these idiots, they still go into this virtue signalling, I'm a lefty nonsense, which is about 30 or 40 years out of date. And then you've got the new ones who they can call neoliberals or whatever. And they're even worse. But yeah, it's almost like you think, well, what would these people do without virtue signalling, because they obviously have deep-ridden guilt about something, and it's obviously come into them through the education system and the media. It can't come in anywhere else, can it? Because it doesn't come in your interactions with people generally, does it? This sort of stuff. I mean, it just doesn't, not in my experience anyway. But yeah, none of this is complicated, but people have been trained into stupidity, and that was the whole idea of the Technocratic society. That's the whole idea of the shows that we've been doing over the past 5 years, really. Britain is the world leader in the new system because it invented it. And this is, of course, above the pay grade of the BBC watching virtue signaller, who is shamed into stupidity and self-loathing by the plasma screen they paid for and watched dutifully. Basically, all they do is watch Netflix and the BBC. A lot of people, I didn't even know this, but apparently most people watch Netflix and the BBC, and they flick back and watch their BBC news, and then they basically drink a lot of alcohol while they're watching television. So you can see why the country is in such a mess, right? And that they can't think. But basically, yeah, the response to facts by the public is in direct proportion to how much poison they ingest from these plasma screens. I've noticed that. Having not had a screen in the house for well over 20 years, and even then using it sparingly, I've not only made a full recovery, but my mental clarity, I feel like, is an all-time high. And this mind virus has actually clarified it even more. And there's quite a lot of people who this is happening to. And that's great, isn't it? Because we're sort of creating a new form of society. Basically, we could be communitarians. We could take over the communitarians, but make up a new name for our society and infiltrate the infiltrators. But there's not enough of us yet. But basically, yeah, I mean, this is another thing that Hope Not Hate referred to my act as karaoke in their review of my output. That was quite funny. And that's something that you see, I'll never forgive, never forget with that one. That'll never be forgotten. That. Seriously though, right? There has to be something wrong with anyone who uncritically watches the BBC. I mean, I still get it all popping up on Facebook with this far right theme, which I still can't understand how anybody thinks that there's a far right, because they only see it on television. If anyone's seen any of it out there, do let me know. But I've been all over the country, and I used to do gigs in the most extreme places. I mean, where you'd expect to find the average racist, and it just isn't there. It just really isn't there. I mean, they have to stretch it quite a long way now to actually make that one stick. But yeah, most of these sort of lefty musicians from the 80s are the ones who failed to adapt, even though they're no longer wearing sort of shoulder pads and baggy pants. Their minuscule brains are still there in that powder. And I've had this with a lot of these musicians I used to know from years ago. It's like they don't get the fact that you're telling them something that is above party politics. They have to go back into party politics. It's absolutely unbelievably frustrating, because they cannot think past it. And I've been sort of ostracised by these people over the years, and now I think it's a great virtue, actually. I mean, it's a great way of us virtue signalling to them, because it means that they have no standing in any argument whatsoever. But yeah, that's just a little kind of aside there, really. Maybe they were listening to too much Kraftwerk, and maybe they are now the biological robots. Remember Kraftwerk, the German band who were very robotic. Well, newsflash, we've now got them as citizens everywhere. But yeah, basically, yeah, I want to get back to the BBC. This is really what I was working up to, by the way. Coronavirus. This is on BBC. Coronavirus. I'm scared of being buried as the wrong gender. LGBT correspondent of the BBC. Now, this adequately sums up what I've just been pointing out. These materialist martyrs to media are facilitating their own self-destruction and making it as outwardly visible as possible through their vocabulary-starved, trivial, narcissistic personalities. The picture says it all. It's got a bloody rainbow on it. I mean, someone's taken a picture of a rainbow. They've got these rainbows everywhere. Well, this, to me, is a sign of a new system, a new old system. We are being put under Noahide laws. If you go into what this really means, the rainbow, or go back to hidden dangers of the rainbow, go back to the New Age, to what the rainbow means, where the rainbow came from. Look up Soviet Autonomous Oblast flag. Soviet Jewish Autonomous Oblast flag. That was the rainbow flag. So we're getting these images put in to the BBC of rainbows. They're in everybody's windows. It's absolutely creepy. It is like a weird cult has taken over in the past 2 months. Basically, image caption, the rainbow, often the symbol of LGBT rights, has become used to thank the NHS and share a message of hope during the lockdown. They put hope in inverted commas here. Now, the present Homo sapiens have doomed themselves, in my opinion, are determined to go out as loudly as possible. This is this new breed of narcissist. They're children of the selfie. These people who don't want to learn anything but repeat whatever they're given. Basically, it says here, even though lockdown measures have eased a little in England, the stay alert guidance is still affecting daily life. 7 weeks on, some LGBT people have told the BBC they are in more danger than ever before. Well, how can we be in more danger than ever before when they're under house arrest? It doesn't make any sense, really, does it? Lucy, 21, from the northeast of England, is transgender and has several heart issues. Oh, wait a minute. So they're going to die of being transgender, and they'll put transgender on the death certificate, but it was really a heart attack. Is that what they're saying? No, but it's a similar thing to COVID-19, isn't it? It's a bit like falling off a building with multiple head injuries, but conveniently having COVID-19 on the death certificate. We've been seeing a bit of that, haven't we? After years spent living as a woman, she says she has no doubt her parents would bury her as a man if she was to die from coronavirus. Now, to me, this exposes the weakness of the materialistic, narcissistic, limited by programming mind of the non-victim in this non-bloody drama. In other words, if you're thinking, about what you're going to be wearing when you're dying, there's something wrong with you. You are absolutely being dumbed down into materialistic nonsense. I've got something I wanted to read out. And it was about children and the afterlife. And the reason I'm putting this together is because all of this is programming. And it was in a book, and it's a great book called Beyond Reality by D. Scott Roggo, one of my favourite parapsychologists. Brilliant man, really brilliant. D. Scott Roggo. One of my favourite books he did was The Infinite Boundary, which was about madness, schizophrenia and multiple personality disorder. One of the absolute fantastic studies ever done, one of the most fantastic studies ever done on this kind of subject. And Roggo was very, very scientific in his approach, and he was murdered actually, and there was a story that his murder got solved beyond the grave. Actually, it's quite an interesting story, but the fella who was actually indicted with his murder was later released. It's a very interesting story, but I'm digressing here. Well, this is a chapter in a book called Children and the Afterlife, and it was basically about how children were much more psychic before education, and also they had no fear of death. Children had no fear of death, the ones that they recorded in these experiments and the studies, before they were educated. And it was only after they were educated they were afraid of death. I think this is a really important point, because having had out-of-body experiences and having experienced a lot of people who've experienced near-death experiences and out-of-body and all this stuff, once you've had those experiences, all this trivia about what death is completely disappears. But this is really what the BBC is all about. It's about bringing everything down to narcissistic, meaningless trivia, which they're doing in this LGBT article, you see. It says, they'll shave my long hair, put me in a suit, use my birth name and call me he, all the way through the funeral. The thought of my family doing it makes me sick, but I know they will. Now, this is a person who's got F all to think about in their lives, apart from their identity. It's a bit sad, really, but it's also the fault of the education system, the media, and probably their parents. But their parents are probably suffering through this, so it's a difficult thing. But has it occurred to this person that it won't effing matter, and the undertaker won't be bothered, and no one is going to care about dressing you as anything when you die, right? This is just unbelievable to me. It was like beyond what I could even make up they would put down. But isn't it more interesting what actually happens after death? Wouldn't you be thinking more towards that rather than what you were going to be buried in, and whether they were going to cut your hair or leave your hair? I mean, it's unbelievable. He says Lucy, who works in a call centre, well, that's a sad job really, says her health issues are the only reason she hasn't moved out of her parents' house. When I came out as trans and I told my parents I would stop living as a boy, they basically said no. They literally tried to beat the trans out of me. My dad told me I needed to find a girlfriend and sort myself out. I'm stuck in isolation with my homophobic parents. If I don't get medication, what will happen to my body? I mean, this is narcissism on an extreme level, and disempowerment. This is absolute disempowerment. This person has not been only disempowered by the confused sexuality, but basically by what their belief is in who they are and what they are. It's just incredible. And then it goes into this awful organisation called Mermaids, which is basically for trans children, which is run by some ex-vicar, you know. It's just ridiculous. But I've just been looking at this study about children, not being afraid of death, and it being a conditioned response, and it's indoctrinated through education. So anyone who knows that empowerment in the new system means disempowerment, they would run a mile from anyone trying to empower them. And this is what happens in foreign countries, by the way, when NGOs go in. People are just running away from being empowered. They do not want to be empowered by BBC Media Action, USAID, or any of the other thousands of NGOs that are trying to empower women through sterilisation and empower communities by splitting them apart. But basically, here's another bit of BBC subversion, which backs up what I'm talking about here. It's called Last Normal Photo. Thousands share last images before lockdown. by Alice Cuddy, BBC News. And guess what the picture is, the main one to start it? A rainbow. This is so creepy. This is really like some weird dystopian nightmare sci-fi drama, you know. It's quite unreal what's going on here. I mean, but I don't look at the BBC website that much, and when I do, it creeps me out, actually. That's the kind of response that it gives me. Because it's so subversively written and so intelligence, community, psychologically steered, it actually makes me feel really quite wretched when I read it, you know. But it says, it all started with a little request we made earlier this month. We asked you to send us the last, in inverted commas, normal photo you had on your phone before coronavirus changed your life. Hundreds of you responded. We were overwhelmed. On Saturday, we brought you 13 of those stories, from major sporting events to family gatherings to a wedding. We then invited more of you to share your photos online using the hashtag #LastNormalPhoto. Can you believe this? This is unbelievable to me, because they are now designating that we did change to a new normal, and there's a dividing line in the sand, and any pictures you took before coronavirus were from a different era. Absolutely stunning. It says, thanks largely to a tweet by journalist Robin Vinter, it quickly became one of the top 3 most used Twitter hashtags worldwide. And I think this is something to do with a picture of a bloody rainbow, you know. It says, among the tens of thousands of photos shared online, there are some common themes. I bet there are. Food, friendships, the utterly random events that make up our lives. In other words, more trivia. Many people's photos showed the last time they were with relatives after lockdowns forced families apart. Now, the last films I've got on my camera phone are of some crows attacking my door, which I've been looking into, which is a very interesting phenomenon. And it's got these occult connotations, but what's more interesting is why they're doing it. And the ferocity of the way they were attacking the door is absolutely incredible. But I've made friends with them now. And this has only just started. So anyone who knows anything about bird behaviour, please get in touch. I'm very interested. I've got some great footage of them at the door as well. They wake me up sometimes very early in the morning, about between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. And they wait there for ages, but they're not even looking for food. It's very odd. However, I don't think that would get onto the BBC last photos before COVID, would it really? I think it's a bit too interesting. But basically, yeah, all this they're doing is keeping the narcissism, selfie-taking trivia going until the loss of everything. So in other words, these people are going to be utterly traumatised when they have lost that ability to finally let their selfies and their trivia back up their life, because their lives are going to fall apart. And many of them are already doing it, aren't they? Many of them are already falling apart. But this is an example of how the manipulated public have come to see themselves disempowered, ignorant and trapped. Meanwhile, the technocratic nightmare is being built around them. The smart cities are going up. Have you noticed? The 40-foot pavements we were talking about are now being openly advertised in every city in the country. I'm getting emails from everywhere, from Britain and Ireland. Of course, it goes on all over the world, but we've got Birmingham, Manchester, London, all over, to coincide with social distancing. They're getting rid of even more cars, getting rid of parking spaces. The cities are for walking and cycling, for you to be trapped in, for you to be surveilled in real time and to be attacked by microwave radiation. And this is another form of possession. Very luckily, I've got a place that's away from a lot of things like that. And there's a huge difference of when I used to live in London. And this goes back to how people are basically disempowered and attacked all the time through this negative programming that's going on everywhere. And what I've found is when you remove it, it does help you think a lot more clearly. I mean, this sounds like common sense stuff, but it's actually very true. Yeah, the bigger picture surrounding what happens after death has been replaced basically with what will I be wearing in the coffin. I mean, that really shocked me. That was just beyond what I could even think possible, because I've spent my life studying parapsychology, near-death experiences, all this kind of stuff. And I was looking at this book this afternoon, and it's a remarkable book, actually. It was given to me by someone a while ago. It's called Beyond Reality, the role unseen dimensions play in our lives. And I wanted to get more into some of the stories in it, but I want to do it justice because it's all stuff that I've been studying for a very long time. And this thing about the psychic power of children and children not being afraid of death is a very important thing, I think, because it just goes to show the indoctrination is about materialism, social Darwinism, being disempowered. So basically, if you're not frightened of death, you're not going to be frightened of an awful lot, really, are you? But yes, it is a major point because it sort of indicates that the public have indeed become biological robots. Well, at least as far as the subverted media is concerned. The smart cities are beckoning now. This is getting very, very quick. The infrastructure is escalating on the back of social distancing. Yeah, more cycling, no cars, no freedom. This is empowerment technocracy style. The smart grid, Internet of Things, overcrowding, mental illness. It'll be the new normal. It already is in London. I mean, that's I lived there for 30 years, and I'm now sort of so glad that I don't live there because the way it's been re-engineered in the past few years is extremely creepy. It's very, very creepy. But basically the invasion of all privacy in every way. I've been looking on this on every level. Multi-agency interference from all of these different organisations like Serco, G4S, Quinitech. This is what I'm looking into. Military intelligence mixed with just about everything else. It's quite incredible. Once you start looking at multi-agency control and what's happening, say, in New Zealand, the police now are going round to people's houses, people who've been identified at protests, and getting them to be interviewed under caution so that they'll accept a fine of over $1,000. I am going to be talking to Barbara from stuavono.org, Barbara McKenzie. And she has a great blog, and she's in New Zealand. Look at that, stuavono.org, STUVOUNO.org. I'll be talking to her on Tuesday about what's going on in New Zealand, because what's going on down under is coming here. They've already got it in Australia, but New Zealand is actually a lot worse what's going on there, courtesy of Jacinda, the SJW. And basically, yeah, smart grid, Internet of Things, the invasion of all privacy, no escape, constant interference. That's what this is about, constant interference, enforcement and negativity at every level. This is what's going on. There is no awareness of this encroaching control in a lot of people. This is the invasion of everything, the rise of the robots, the death of the living, all being escalated on the back of the beneficial crisis. So the bigger picture, the one that is being suppressed like never before, is what we're talking about here. The end of cash is nigh. I went to supermarket yesterday. I used to go at night when there's no one there queuing up with a face mask on. And what was interesting was, even as this thing's meant to be lifted, this COVID-19 mind virus, they've now got these announcements saying that they're going to accept only contactless payments. Well, that's not true. They did accept cards, but they're telling you they're going to accept only contactless payments, and you must social distance from the staff. The staff are there to help you by being socially distant and all this stuff. But why are they bringing it in now when it's meant to be over? Because this computer simulation that we're in is just rolling stuff out, because this is a compliance test. This is a test of public compliance. And at this point, I'm just going to have a little bit of a rest. I'm just going to have a short break, and then we shall be back. Yes, in a couple of minutes.
You're welcome to Windows on the World, and the concept of how Earth run today. Because today, the way the world run today, they're not running by the law of life. Because the law of life is just one law. But they create their law to go around the law of life.
If you realise how deep the rabbit hole goes, I mean, the people coming out now, even in the entertainment business, saying, I sold my soul to the devil so I could be famous. And you go, Jesus, yeah. And you look at people and you think, how did he get famous? He's crap. And then you think, oh, he must have sold his soul to the devil. Oh, here's Wayne again. He's going to give us all that New World Order crap. And you think, oh, what am I wasting my time even mentioning it? You know, it's only in conversation. And they'd rather talk about football. And, you know, you think, oh, what a waste of space. You know, and it's, oh, Manchester United did this. And you think, what a load of crap. Who cares? You know, who cares about Manchester United and Manchester City? And then you look, you think, this is it. They're just programmed. That's going to be their life. You know, women will watch soaps and men will go to football, and then you'll get up in the morning, you'll go to work and you'll do this, and then you'll finish at 5 if you're lucky. You'll go home, you won't have time for your kids, you won't. And you think, but is this what we're born for? You know, just to be slaves, really. You're just slaves.
Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net. Welcome back, everyone. I'm going to have to do a new jingle there, aren't I? Because the new time for the Sunday show is 9:30. Going to get on to Biometrics now. This is from biometricupdate.com. Anticipation for broad deployments of biometrics for contactless work processes is exceeded only by excitement for the commercialization of fingerprint payment cards, with IDEX Biometrics in particular continuing to make headlines with announcement and messaging. These are the corporations, in their own words, who are riding the wave of COVID-19. So what we've got here is a massive infrastructure rollout which is all ready to go with facial recognition and all the rest of it. We actually went over the future of flying, which is going to be basically sprayed with disinfectant, wearing a mask, and going through this biometric kind of nightmare every time you get on a plane. This is what they want to do to stop people flying. This is what these idiots, these fake leftists, are embracing by ignoring it and focusing on the trivia of their lives and their selfies. Well, basically, yes, supermarkets say they're only taking contactless payments, even though they're still taking normal card machines. So all this is being rolled out, as we've sort of stated before, in real time. All these impositions diminish the bigger reality, though, which is what the smart harvesting of energy, resources and time is all about. This is all about technocracy. It's all about basically your impact, your level of energy, your output, your taking from the system, what that balances out as your carbon credits, your biometric footprint, your carbon footprint, your biometric, basically data harvesting. It's incredible once you start looking into this stuff, because it's mind-boggling, the size of it. The actual industry of this is probably the biggest growth industry there is, and after this beneficial crisis, it probably will be the biggest growth industry, because looking at the multi-agency complicity of all this, it's absolutely incredible. You've got this Cancino Biological in Canada, who are already rolling out this coronavirus vaccine. You've got these multi-agencies involved in this vaccine, which I think they've already got. Along, obviously, we've got the Johns Hopkins University instructing us from America, and we've got the Imperial College here. But basically, all these impositions diminish the bigger reality, which is what this smart harvesting of energy and resources is all about. The external is always pulling, and the internal energy is harvested by beliefs and trapped into thoughts, which is what we're talking about in the first part of the show. But in the external hierarchy, everything we've been talking about for years has now been escalated faster than I thought possible. In 2 months and a global lockdown, everything has changed. And what's weird about this is that in other countries, stranger things are happening. In other words, countries hardly affected by this, like Asian countries, are reporting that they're putting up more traffic barriers, which would coincide with them getting rid of cars in the cities over here. So there's all sorts of things being tested for the smart city agenda. This is just a rehearsal for what's coming. And the amount of hive flats in London that we've been talking about, this must mean that they are intending to get everyone out of the country. And this is where I think the resistance is really going to be. It's got to be at some point. And once they try getting people into these smart cities, I think that will be a very interesting time. But I'm going to finish off now with this. It's quite an interesting thing. It's about defending yourself against all of this nonsense, basically. It's from this book again, and I was just looking through this today, Beyond Reality, the Role Unseen Dimensions Play in Our Lives. And it's a chapter called Scientific Evidence for Psychic Self-Defense. And this was in San Antonio in Texas. It was a place called the Mind Science Foundation. And the institution, it's a privately funded research centre that houses a parapsychology laboratory and library. Now, this was in the 90s, remember, it's quite a long time ago. But they were still doing a lot of experiments in parapsychology up until that point. And this fella was looking at psychic healing. And they went from the healing aspect of like the transference of energy into the idea of psychic attack. Could people be attacked with energy? And they began pondering whether techniques could be established for warding off such influences. For when they realised that psychokinesis could be used to heal, it also struck them that it could simultaneously be used to harm people. This is certainly the opinion, it says, of Dr. William Broad, who relinquished his faculty position with the University of Houston to devote himself to parapsychology full-time in the 1970s. Now, it says Dr. Broad presented the results of his initial research at the 1984 annual convention of the Parapsychological Association, which convened that year on the campus of Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. Dr. Broad had previously mentioned his exciting research to me when he visited Los Angeles. This is to D. Scott Roggo, who's dead now. But what's interesting about this to me is that I've got a huge library of this stuff. And from the late 1950s onwards through the 60s, parapsychology was being taken incredibly seriously in laboratory conditions and tested very acutely and in a very detailed way by very serious people. Now, if you start looking this stuff up now, you won't come up with anything scientific like this where they actually did tests on people in isolation and tried to get people to psychically attack people. And I'm going to get onto my point in a minute because it's quite important, this. But what you get is crystal gazing new age narcissists talking rubbish. This again is the trivialization of things that are incredibly important to the survival of the psyche and the well-being of the person. You know, it's incredible, this stuff. But yes, they did some tests with these CSR gauges, which basically pick up the electrical energy that goes into the skin. It's called galvanic skin response. The GSR gauge is the skin's fluctuating power to conduct an electrical current. The more relaxed you become, the less electrical activity is picked up by electrodes connected to the skin. So they go on and on with this stuff. It's quite a detailed study. But it's very fascinating because his discovery of allobiofeedback, he calls it, biopsychokinesis, he calls it, indicates that probably many people possess some power similar to psychic healing. We conceived of these experiments as healing analogues, Dr. Broad explained during a break in a conference. We were standing together in a small meeting room while our colleagues were examining some new computer software. So basically it goes on that it says that these tests suggested by Dr. Broad that psychokinesis could possibly harm people if projected to them with negative thoughts. He became rather circumspect when our conversation proceeded further. Now, anyone who's seen our shows with Jerry Marzinski knows that I've taken this to the ultimate extreme with demonic possession and mental illness, particularly paranoid schizophrenia. Which is a very enigmatic condition. But basically he says that drawing upon principles from folklore and occult literature, Dr. Broad instructed his co-experimenters to imagine a bright pulsating oval of white light between the subject and target envelopes. The instructions worked. Dr. Broad found that the subjects were much better at psychically exploring the sealed envelopes when nobody interfered with the protest. So in other words, you're doing a sort of a test, basically, and it's in a sealed envelope. Now, I've tried this myself, and what they try and do is to interrupt your thought patterns as you're doing it. Now, I attended a a course several years ago with people who were looking into this stuff. They were mainly Portuguese and Brazilians, and they were quite skilled at what they were doing. And they did several tests, and what was absolutely fascinating was that they could teach you to defend yourself against these incoming energies. Now, I think most people have felt like when someone's staring at them or negative energy, you can feel it being projected at you. But can you imagine what they can do with this technology? So I think that it is really time to start thinking about this, because I've been looking into it a long time, and I went into this experimentation, and it was absolutely fascinating, because this fella, he said, the teacher on this course, with this bioenergy field stuff, he actually said, okay, build up your energy field, and I'm going to try and attack it. So I did, and he attacked the energy field, and I told him exactly where he'd attacked, and it was absolutely spot on. And the intensity of the attacks was absolutely spot on as well. So in other words, this stuff is tangible. So then it got into more experimental things of trying to find things that he'd psychically put in certain positions or under carpets in my house. So I had to sort of work that out. And that was very accurate too. Now, this is an important point, because once you're brainwashed by the media, you have got this materialistic belief, like what those poor people who are trans and they're worried about dying and all the rest of it. This is absolutely disempowering. The only way to actually really empower yourself, not in a UN kind of way, right? Not in a diverse, vibrant kind of way, is to learn about this stuff now, I think, because the intrusion of these energy fields is going to get worse with the 5G and all that. I don't want to get too kind of off the topic here, but I have noticed that Wi-Fi in places, especially in cities and in urban areas, really is not very good for your inner equilibrium. It definitely isn't. And I think that this stuff can be really helpful. And I want to go more into it in the weeks to come, because I've found that there are ways of dealing with it. And I want to look at more of these studies and get more into this, because it's an area that I think we can explore in future shows, because we've gone now into the Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 stuff is here. It's happening. And the only way to try and survive outside of it is to be sovereign. And to be sovereign, I think you do have to know a bit about this stuff. I mean, the awareness of it is extremely important, I think. And if you look at the show I did with Jerry a few weeks ago, I think that's kind of self-explanatory. But this is fascinating stuff, and I want to read more and more about these tests, because the actual evidence in this book is quite powerful. And I have also got the books about the actual tests that were done in the 60s onwards with parapsychology and all of this stuff. It's all been tested, and it's a real shame that this has kind of dropped out into this new age kind of crystals and tarot and Kabbalah and all this stuff that they lump together now, which is, in my view, pretty dangerous. And also it's detrimental, because it's basically bringing in energy oftentimes that people don't realise. A lot of this new age stuff, these people who channel it and all the rest of it, in my view, it's very, very dangerous. And I've seen the results of that. I've seen people descending into mental illness and being attacked. And the thing is, with all this military technology that they're using now and this cross-agency stuff, I've been getting a lot of information from people up and down the country over the years of how this kind of targeted individual stuff works. Now, I don't go into that, because I think a lot of them are actually not targeted individuals in the real sense. The people who do get sort of hit by this sort of stuff, in my view, are the ones who are under the radar, because they don't know what's happened to them. And these are the ones that I've come across. I know several, actually, and it's happened to me, this targeting. And I think it's going to get a lot worse, because with the kind of rise of the technocratic society which we're in, the smart city agenda, I can only see this sort of stuff escalating. So I hope that wasn't too off topic tonight. I'm just going to have a quick look in chat, but I think it's kind of interesting to sort of go into these general areas sometimes. Do join me on RBN, Republic Broadcasting Network, on Tuesday and Thursday, 8 p.m. UK time. I've got Barbara McKenzie on Tuesday and another special guest on Thursday. And also we do the live stream now at 9:30 p.m. on Wednesday. So yeah, I'm glad that a few people have got a hang of the new time, and it is 9:30 p.m. now. So I'm going to sign off in a minute, just having a look at chat. Somebody's put some interesting stuff in actually last week, and I wanted to bring that up. I don't know whether I can get back to it now. There's some great, mask wearers stifle themselves by keeping in CO2, keeping out oxygen, lowering their immunity and causing unconsciousness eventually. Well, some Japanese bloke jogging with a mask collapsed his lung, didn't he, this week? It was in the newspaper. I mean, it's incredible, this. And they are trying to basically mentor the public into total stupidity by wearing these masks all the time. This is, I think, going back to last week, but I didn't have time to look. I got actually locked out of chat last week, and I think I've got it back now, but it's something to do with the browser on here. Yes, the mask is a symbol of the slave's mouth, and voice is taken away. You have no voice, you cannot speak, you are submissive. This is so true. This is a psychological operation the likes I've never seen. It's creepy beyond belief, isn't it? But I think we can have some fun exposing it and actually seeing what effect small numbers of kind of interested and awakened type people can have. I don't like to use the word awake now because it's been hijacked, really, hasn't it? It's gone a bit new age, that one. But yes, hello Monthly Blimpton, hello Guy Vo, hello Cider Guy, Mur, Prince of Pangea, and anyone else who's in there, because a lot of people are now listening to the American show, so thanks to that. I'm going to leave now. I've got a lot more research to do, and do help us out on Patreon if you would like to be involved in the film The Heretics of London, The Smithfield Martyrs. I'm going to get a trailer out of that. I know I keep saying it, but I've been working on this to get this kind of finished article out, and it'll be out over the next week or so, and then the film will be ready later in the year, and hopefully we're going to do some screenings if everything's okay and we don't have to go out wearing masks with oxygen bubbles or whatever they want us to wear. So yes, that's great. Thanks a lot, everyone, and good night. Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and program stream at windowsontheworld.net.